And with that, we'll start with the first speaker, Bill Wilson, a past executive member of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs.
Thank you very much, Brian, Kitty, and all the Indian people present and all the people present. It's encouraging to see you come out on such a horrible day to listen to something which for many of you I'm sure would seem to be extremely obscure, if not completely out of line with present-day thinking. Brian did mention that I was a past member of the executive of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, and as such I felt that the whole conference scene would be over for me and that I wouldn't have to be addressing assemblies and talking to other people and going to workshops and doing various other things. There were a lot of reasons why I was very glad that that kind of a system would be over, because in fact that's the answer of the Canadian government to just about all the problems that confront them. It's hold a conference, give the people a little bit of money, let them organize, come to the meeting, blow off steam and go home and think they've done something. And I suggest that perhaps that's what Habitat is all about. Is let us get together, blow off steam, get a bad case of verbal diarrhea, go home and think we've accomplished something, and yet the problems continue to exist, in fact compound, because we're burying our head in the sand. And I can state to you quite categorically that that is the policy of the Canadian government in regard to its native peoples. We have no desire on the part of a government that now is acting as a showcase for the world to deal with the problem that confronts them in their backyard. The answer to the question of the native problems is, let us buy off a few native leaders with large core funding dollars. Let us create status positions and expense accounts, organizations that are nothing more than puppets of the federal government. Let us fund them and fund them and fund them, but never allow them to do anything. As soon as they get close to accomplish anything, let us take their funding away from them. Let us make it difficult for them to operate. Let us have RCMP officers following them around and taking pictures of them. Let us have other security people hassling them in their personal lives. Let's have people with long lenses sitting in the stands trying to be obscure, snapping picture after picture after picture. That seems, unfortunately, to be not only the answer of the Canadian government, but probably every other government that ever took over a land that was occupied originally by a people who had been there since time immemorial. And this is such a land. Australia is such a land. Africa and all its aspects is such a land. India was such a land. And here, in the latter part of the 20th century, we are making exactly the same mistake in Canada. And Aboriginal rights, while it may seem something very obscure, something for lawyers to talk about, something for ego-tripping Indian leaders to talk about, something that makes press, something for the oil companies to bandy about, something for bureaucrats to make thousands and thousands of dollars a year off the backs of Indians, comes down to one simple question: whether or not we as a country, and you can substitute any name you want, whether or not we as a country have the moral turpitude to allow people to survive in a manner that's consistent with their history. And the question of Aboriginal rights here in Canada is whether or not we are going to allow the Indians in British Columbia and the Indians in the Yukon and the Indians in the Northwest Territories and in every other province of this country to survive with some dignity in a manner that reflects their traditions. Or are we going to proceed as we proceeded everywhere in history? Are we going to proceed on the assumption that we are right and everything else that's inconsistent with what we believe in is wrong, and that we have the God-given right to erase all traces of cultures that have existed for 20,000 years? And that's what the issue is all about. And don't let the oil companies confuse you, and don't let the lawyers confuse you, and don't let the politicians confuse you. It's not about progress. It's not about energy. It's not about the requirements in the South. It's not about occupation since time immemorial. It's not about the proclamation of 1763 or the Nishka case. And it's not about something called the just society, or all of us participating as equals in a country. What it's about in a nutshell is genocide. It's about the desire of one culture, because they happen to have more numbers, to eliminate another culture because they happen to be in a minority, and because their values and their beliefs and their history and traditions are somehow inconsistent with the all-consuming culture that seems to be devouring the land and the water and the air. And it doesn't matter how you try to rationalize that, that's genocide. It just takes a little longer, because probably we don't have the balls of the Nazis that did it in a night, or did it in a couple of days. Being much more humane, will stretch it out for 150 years to 300 years, but the end result will be the same. Some supposedly superior race will dominate the entire country, and those that happen to feel different or believe different will disappear. And that's the struggle of Indians insofar as Aboriginal rights is concerned. And you can throw out all your doctrines, throw out all your legal bullshit, throw out all the political jargon. It's a question of whether or not Indian people in this province and in this country will be alive 100 years from now.